My name is John Howard, and today's a short video. It is actually going to be about how I made a stubborn decision during the Great Recession to hold on to my properties that were potentially underwater at the time, and how that story has panned out. So let's get into it. During the Great Recession, I made a stubborn and unique decision to hold on to my two of my own properties at the time, which is, this is say circa 2008 to 2011. In Southern California, even though one of them, or maybe even both of them, were, kind of the value kept dropping and dropping, like literally, I think all the way into 2010 or maybe even 2011. But, yeah, so basically those mortgages at the time were fixed, whereas the values kept dropping, right? So here is the story and how everything has panned out since that time frame, right? So I'm going to start this video off with a quote. Actually, one of my favorite investors from Warren Buffett. Our favorite holding period is forever. Invest for the long haul. Patience is a virtue in this market. So during this, basically the critical time really was, let's say, 2010. And the reason I used 2010 was because what had happened was it was 2010 and I was actually living in kind of a, really cool hip loft penthouse by the beach in Los Angeles. And at that time I was hitting about 5 years of living there, right? I also had my own owned vacation home, which at that time was already pretty proven and doing pretty well as a vacation rental, or, a short and medium term rental, let's just call it, right, at the time. But what had happened was, it was 2010, and less than a year prior, I actually had my first child was born. I was actually a single dad at the time, trying to see where everything went. Didn't really know what was going to happen with that situation, with with my son's mother. But basically, yeah. So a new little baby was in the mix. But what I did was in 2010. It was a 5-year ARM at the time. So because it was a 5-year ARM, what was happening was at the end of those 5 years, which was September 2010, I was going to have to start paying the mortgage down, which, in retrospect, it's a really great thing to pay the mortgage down, but that's going to start increasing your cost of living by like $1,000 at the time, $1,000 to $1,500 a month. Because what they did with the ARMs was, let's just say the mortgage closed in 2005, 20 years ago, they let, even though you're not paying the principal down in those first 5 years, once those 5 years ends, you got to start paying the principal down like the 30 years started when you first got the loan. So it's effectively, what is that, 5 years times 12? So that's like 60 payments, right? So you now have to start catching up on 60 payments of principal that you never made. So what I did was in 2010, this was pretty much right before I hit that 5-year mark, and the payments were going to go up. I moved out of the property, and I moved out of that residence where I was an owner. Then I was living there, right, so that I could start renting that out. And in that case, both of my properties at the time would become rentals. I do admit that the other rental, again, as I already said, it was performing pretty well. It was performing pretty well as a hybrid, like short and medium term, and even long term rental, right? So keep in mind, this was actually at a time that I think Airbnb was coming out. I think Airbnb was founded in about 2011, but it doesn't really matter because I didn't even start using Airbnb. I didn't even discover it until 2012, and I don't think I started using it till 2012 or 2013. But due to depreciation and active income offset, I wrote off all expenses for both properties and paid like literally no income taxes. And this is on over $100,000 of non-real estate income, meaning like $100,000 of my non-real estate business, like my regular business, right? So what happened was during this time, so even though I had my other property, which was an hour and 30 minutes inland of Los Angeles, and that had been like kind of a hybrid short and medium term furnished rental, I actually decided to turn that into a long-term rental. So I had somebody, it was like the winter, because usually I would rent it out from like, let's say, November to like May, or a winter tenant in, or at least a couple winter tenants, right? So I decided to rent it to someone for 6 months, and they ended up staying for a lot longer. But basically, this actually was okay because I needed a break, because I actually, at that time, that little baby was now 2. So it was kind of a toddler, and I was very busy with, spending time and and trying to be, in the life of, the toddler. I was also self-managing, that rental that was an hour and 30 minutes away. VRBO and Airbnb, were starting to get hot again. So basically, somebody moved in, they were actually living there, and they ended up living there for almost 3 years. So like over 2.5 years. So what happened was I got to about the 2.5 year mark, with that particular group. And I was like, you know what, I got to get back in to, Airbnb and VRBO are just super hot. And it turned out to be, the right decision. It took a little bit of time. I actually had to spend longer than I planned to get that particular tenant, out of there. But in any case, from the time that I provided notice to the time that they left, it was probably like 3 months. So I felt really strongly, again, during this time, let's say it's summer to fall of 2014, right? During this time, I felt really strongly about this move, and it really turned out that it was certainly the right thing to do. And the reason I say that is because, that particular area, it's in between, let's say, Temecula and Corona. The long-term rents are not that good, and certainly back in those days, like back in like 2011 to 2014, they just weren't that good, right? And it was such a strong move that if you actually fast forward and you look to, which so far has been my banner month for just, again, these are just 2 wholly owned properties. I do actually have, portfolio where I've got a partial interest in another property and looking to actually acquire more as we speak, because I do this video. But the largest month, the banner month I've had so far is May of 2023. In that 1 month, I actually had more midterm rental deposits than I did for a whole year's worth of rent. So what I mean is, let's say, for example, the long-term unfurnished rent is like really low in that area, like, $2,000 to $2,300 or something, right? So if you take a look at that 1 month, it was April of 2023. It was, that 1 month I had more deposits in that 1 month than I would for a whole year, of deposits for a long-term unfurnished renter. So anyway, obviously the idea panned out very well. So some years had passed and this hybrid model thrived. So when I say hybrid, what I mean is kind of a hybrid of like short and medium term rentals, right? Just really kind of doing some shorter rentals during the times, when it's really primed to do them. Like, let's say really summer, which is like, let's say Memorial Day to Labor Day. And then also, you kind of have also then 2 other mini summers, which is really the holidays, December, January. And then also spring break is kind of a little bit of a mini summer as well, because you kind of have a month of all these different spring breaks. So again, back to the spirit of the story. So this is just, me making the decision to, even though these properties are underwater, I'm going to hang on to them because I feel like they'll be valuable someday, right? That's really the goal here. So anyway, so during this time, here we are. I've gotten the place back on, doing, the short and medium term rentals again, got the long-term tenant out. And I'm like, okay, the Great Recession has passed. So Great Recession pretty much started, depending on where your area was, maybe 2007, but everybody pretty much saw it in 2008. So, 2008 to, let's say, 2013, all those years had passed, and, property equity, finally, at least here in Southern California, started coming up. So I think it hit its floor in 2012, and then property equity started to go up in 2013. So during this time, I decided that, I want to use some of the equity in these places because also, like, during the time of it going down, I'm also paying the mortgages down, right? So even though the property values are going down, I'm paying the mortgages down. So when the properties went up, obviously all those pay downs, really had a nice effect. I decided, I want to do a development build and flip. It was a little bit, probably in hindsight, too ambitious, because I kind of, went after too big of a project in terms of my realm of experience at the time. But that's what I wanted to do. So this project, it did end up being kind of basically a nightmare. Ended up, the first contractor we hired was a hybrid architect and contractor. They said they could do the whole thing for X, and then we spent X, and they were like not even close to 50% done. So we had to, bring somebody else in, and then that person just could not do it for the amount that they said. Ultimately, we landed on a real estate agent that did a phenomenal job and was able to finish it, and we, sold it for a very hefty and nice profit. So, at least it ended up being a moneymaker. And, some of this experience that I got, for it is not a total waste, because, I'm actually, as I'm navigating some different real estate investments as I do this video, one of would be, a short-term rental, which is probably not in the immediate term. Maybe it's in the next year or two. But in that, I'm going to have to do some renovations. So, some of this experience will play out well for that reason. But in any case, even though we did sell this particular project for a healthy profit, there was heavy construction on this deal, and there was a lot of like private money borrowing. And even for me, like I had to use equity in my loft penthouse, right, as a third mortgage for the actual lender that was lending on the property to do the construction financing, so that we could finish the project. So anyway, was able to kind of sell that for a nice profit and everything. Now, what I will say is, in terms of the profits from that particular project, I didn't necessarily buy another rental after that. I was just kind of needed to relax, because it ended up taking like a little bit more than 2 years of my life, and it was really time consuming and emotionally and physically consuming. Also, the way that was I did have a partner on that deal, and it ended up having bring money from multiple places, but I was what's called the active developer, so I was kind of the one that made all the decisions. There was also another passive developer on the deal where they just kind of can question anything or whatever, but they don't necessarily make the decisions. So really what I did though was I did invest some of those proceeds, the profits. I mean, it was, pretty nice. Nothing like life changing, but still, let's say over 100,000, in profit to myself, from that particular deal. But I did put quite a bit of that money into, or some of that money into doing some renovations at my lake property, which was a rental, right? So, redid the kitchen cabinets, kind of fixed up a bunch of stuff. So things that kind of needed to be done, which is still requires, not an insignificant amount of capital, but I didn't necessarily use that money to buy a new rental. So the years had passed, and then all of a sudden now it's 2020 and the pandemic hits, and then, all of a sudden it's scary for like a couple of weeks, but then demand surges. And then all of a sudden here we are, it's like, May and June, and every day feels like Christmas. And that went on for really a while, actually. During that time, I was actually able to finance both of those properties at a 2.875% 30-year fixed mortgages. And then also during that time having, really quite a few months of payment gaps because of being able to kind of refinance during that time, right? Well, yeah, so everything kind of kept getting better after 2020 with respect to the rental portfolio, right? And then even one of my properties, my loft penthouse, somebody moved in during the pandemic in the summer of 2021, and actually they're still there, right? And they're actually paying the medium-term furnished rental rate. They continue to do that, and as the years have passed, now the market rate is pretty much equal to that medium-term rental rate. So where we're at now is I still continue to experience fruitful months with the hybrid model, with the short medium-term model. As I mentioned earlier in the video, kind of had this banner month, which was April of 2023. So here's the thing. So if I were to show you my bank account, actually the actual deposits are $34,760.43. But the reality was the the renter in the loft penthouse in Los Angeles, they kind of didn't deposit all of their deposits that particular month. So it's supposed to be 37,000 and change, but they just kind of missed the deposits and then made, more deposits in the next month. Certainly not a great scenario, but that's what happened. And then now here we are, my rental portfolio is worth about $3 million. The mortgages are slightly below 600,000, and they are 30-year 2.875% fixed mortgages with Wells Fargo. It's been a fortuitous ride, right? And things have really worked out well in that scenario. I've been able to, manage the short, medium term, and even long term, tenants, and have learned that the hybrid model and really actually medium term rental works the best. Another thing that's kind of nice is I was also able to use one of the properties. So this was a very vacation, style property, and what is very unique and exciting about it was I was actually also able to use this property during vacancies, with friends, family, for really special outings. And even my girlfriend and her daughter, who was one at the time, we spent a lot of time there raising her from 1 year old with, a very wonderful outdoor experience. For example, it's this property is in Southern California, a really pretty lake. So, with water sports and stand-up paddleboard and boating and other water sports and pool and barbecues and stuff like that. So very fun for fun events. And then also my son, I did birthdays for him from age 7 all the way to 14, so 8 birthdays we did, and my birthday's 2 days after my son, so it's like like a joint party, right? And that was very special. And then even in some cases, he had multiple friends come out for his birthday outings at the special birthday. And then also my girlfriend's daughter, we were able to do multiple birthdays for her at the property as well. So I was able to, clearly make incredible memories over many years. And during this whole time, I was able to save on taxes, from all those years and benefit from appreciation, and from forced savings from the mortgages being paid down. And of course, all the rental income and cash flow over the years. So, what I would say is, of course, max out your retirement contributions, your 401k, your IRA, all that stuff, and invest in the markets, invest in the S&P 500. But don't miss one of the greatest wealth builders in our country's existence, which is being able to own and experience a return from investment property. Everybody, as you can see, I've been doing real estate as content for the last many pieces of content and videos, as well as postings. And if you are somebody that is interested in getting into real estate investing, what you'll do is you'll see some links in the description. I've got something I have called the SMTR Launch Kit. You can go check that out. I also have my email address listed. You can do, I also offer very basic and inexpensive email coaching in the event that you want to work with somebody that might be a little bit more of an expert than you. Maybe you're just getting started, or maybe you are already along your path, but maybe you like the idea of working with somebody that is a little bit more of an expert. I've actually done these short and medium term furniture rentals for literally the last 2 decades. And during that time, I also launched and operated 4 different businesses that all went up to 7 figures. And I say that just because this is something that you can do alongside of a very demanding career if you're an entrepreneur or even an executive. And during that time of my entrepreneurial career, I launched and operated 5 different short and medium term rentals alongside of everything else. So kind of weird saying that. I certainly was busy and hustled, but it's very doable. So if you like this content and you like my story, you can consider giving the video a like. You can also consider subscribing to the channel. If you are not interested in getting into investing, or maybe you're already far along and you don't want the SMTR Launch Kit, you could consider forwarding this video to someone that that is interested in getting into real estate investing. Okay, thank you very much and have a great one.